Hey, I'm Sean with the Comics Pals, and I am live at New York Comic Con 2019. It is Saturday, and this place is booming. I'm sitting again for the second time the entire weekend, and again, I'm sitting next to one of my favorite creators, so lucky me. I am with writer Matthew Rosenberg of Punisher, X-Men, all kinds of great things. How's your con going?
It's good. When you said you were sitting with one of your favorite creators, I thought you meant Dan Slott, who's sitting over there, which I'm excited about. I like sitting next to him.
He's
And
nice
you.
too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's just great. It's just great to sit down.
It really is.
It's really great.
You just came from the Marvel booth, and you were doing a signing there, right?
Yes.
How was that?
It was good. The Marvel booth is always a funny thing because you never know, like, there are a lot of little kids which, like, don't really come to Artist Alley as much, and there's all sorts of different fans, and you really feel like you're introducing people to stuff in a fun way sometimes. And I was with a bunch of really good people, and it was awesome. It was fun watching people sketch, and they were talking about the Iron Man VR game, and I want to play that, and it looked awesome. And I was like, kind of hinting that they should give me one. They definitely are not going to, but
Well, you know, you got to shoot your shot, right?
yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, speaking of getting people into comics, I wanted to know from you, how did you get into comics?
So I have an older brother. It's not that unique a story. He was like, don't touch my stuff, ever. And then he'd go out, and I, of course, wanted to touch his stuff then. So I would go and read his comics, and he was reading X-Men and Fantastic Four. So those were, like, literally the things that I learned to read on. But I actually grew up in New York, and I grew up on the block of a comic book store. So,
Which one?
Big Apple Comics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 93rd in West End. I grew up on it. It was 93rd and Broadway. And so, like, before I could, like, really go out, my parents were like, well, he only has to cross one street to go to the comic book store. So that was, like, my beginning of, like, you're allowed to go there. And that was just, like, an everyday trip for me to be like, what can I find? What can I read? What can I afford today? And my parents were super supportive. They're both writers, so they were like, it's a bookstore, sort of. Like, you can spend money there. So, yeah, I just was around comics always because of that.
How do you feel that your love for comics sort of shaped who you grew up to be as a man?
Well, I'm sort of like a man-child. And, like, yeah, kind of emotionally stunted, which is cool. And in case that was ambiguous, I think that's cool to be not, like, fully developed. And no, I think, like, it's funny because I can sort of look back on different periods of my life where I'm like, oh, comics was this to me and this, and, like, you know, superhero comics are a great morality tale for children, and then, you know, I was getting into indie comics when I was older and sort of, like, appreciating art and storytelling from, like, different perspective, and, like, Love and Rockets made me love, like, you know, underground art and you know, like, Hate and 8-Ball and all these, like, weird things where I was like, oh, I really appreciate things that, like, aren't mainstream and aren't mass culture, and like, you know, telling different kinds of stories, and sort of fell back in love with superhero comics. And I think at various different points I can find the moment where, like, comics is, like, it's always just been a part of my life. So, like, the easier question is, like, what part of my life isn't sort of shaped by comics? But yeah, I mean, it's just an ever-present thing. Like, I still am at the comic shop every week. I still am, you know, reading comics every night. Like, it's sort of in my DNA as much as, like, that's a cliche, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned sort of loving, you know, indie comics that are, you know, outside of, you know, the mainstream a little bit.
Sure.
And you very much caught my eye personally, alongside with a few other creators like Ed Brisson and Christopher Sabella, who were up and coming and sort of breaking tradition and doing different things. And that was one of the things that I really loved about you, you know, on your rise. And now you're at Marvel and you're doing some amazing work over there. Do you ever get that itch to kind of, you know, step back and do some of the stuff that you kind of cut your teeth on?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you know, Marvel is a thing I love dearly, and I grew up with these characters, and they very much shaped a lot about me, but they're also, it's a specific thing, and there are things you can't do there. You'd be surprised at all the things you can do there, but there are things you can't do, and I think, like, you know, a healthy diet is varied, and yeah, I mean, I want to be doing all kinds of other stuff, and so there's always that urge, I think, and for guys like you said, like Ed and Chris, who are two of my closest friends, like, um, like you see their indie books and like. You're just like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be making a world. I want to be like telling a different thing, and like, I'm just in awe of Chris Sabella, like the stuff he does. Like he's just building like the best ideas in comics. Every 2 months, he's like, here's an idea, and I'm just like, damn, that's so good. Like, God, it's so frustrating. And in some ways, like, we don't have to do that at Marvel. Like the world is built. Like people understand it, and that's an amazing creative freedom to have that, and also like a creative limitation. So there's an up and a bad to sort of everything, and like an up and a down to everything. And yeah, I mean, but I have a new creator-owned book coming out next year at Image that I'm very excited about, called "What's the Furthest Place from Here," with Tyler Boss, who did Four Kids Walk Into a Bank with me. And we're like really excited about it, and I have some other stuff I'm working on in that area.
That's actually really exciting, because I was going to ask you if you had anything coming down the pipe. So it's great to know that you are still working in that space.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing a thing at Archie, and I have other stuff at Black Mask, and then some stuff that we're figuring out where it's going to go. But yeah, I'm doing a bunch of that stuff for sure. While still doing Marvel stuff, I'm doing a ton of stuff for Marvel.
So speaking of the ton of stuff from Marvel,
Yes.
Most recently Punisher wrapped up,
Yes.
and that was incredible.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And what I've loved about the way that the whole book wrapped up is the reaction that you've been getting. And it seems like people have really connected and have been super supportive. So can you speak to how it feels for you to do something like that with a character who's, very popular, but not necessarily hasn't had great runs more recently, and for you to come in and kind of, do something that people have appreciated?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, anytime people react to your work, it's super flattering. Like, just one person picking up something I wrote, like, means the world to me, let alone, like, thousands, 30,000 people reading The Punisher or whatever it is. It's awesome, and it's super flattering. But, yeah, I mean, The Punisher specifically, like, I was on the book for 2.5 years. We did 27 issues. And it's a challenging book because he's a character who's he's one thing. He's not one-dimensional, but he is a constant. Like, the Marvel Universe moves around Frank Castle, and he's the Rock. And so there are different ways to handle that. And the fan base for The Punisher specifically, like, has ones they love and ones they hate.
Right.
And it's always fascinating. And some of the ones they hate, I really love. And some of the ones they love, I'm like, that's fine.
Right.
So it's always like, when you do a book like that, you sort of wonder, like, well, where's this going to land in the canon of The Punisher? And I'm really pleased. Like, people, not everybody. There's a thing in the last issue that, like, my editor Jake Thomas and me had a long talk about, where they were like, he was like, some fans are not going to like it, and I was like, it's very important to me that this is how this plays out. And we talked about that, and I've heard from the fans who didn't like it, but it's sort of the to me it's sort of the DNA of The Punisher, this one moment in the last issue, and it's fun to see the people who get it and the people who don't. Like, I'm sorry to the people who feel let down, but also, like, it's my book. Like, where this is my take, and someone else is going to come along. In this case, it's Garth Ennis next month, who's going to do it, and he's the best that there's ever been at it, and it's going to be awesome. And I hope that they are not soured enough that they don't come back, because Garth is the master, and he's going to give them what they want. But, like, it's our job to sort of tell our story that we feel is important. And, like, I feel really lucky because a lot of people did connect with it. They've been so kind online and here at the show. Punisher fans and X-Men fans have just been all day, all weekend, like, bringing me books and stuff. And it's really, there's no nicer feeling in the world.
I think Punisher has a similar DNA to Daredevil in comics, in the sense that writers often put him through the ringer.
Yeah.
And that's something that I, as a fan of both characters, definitely appreciate, because those are two books where it feels as though you guys are able to push boundaries in certain ways, and I really appreciate that you didn't pull punches, in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're, the street level books. Uh, it's not. We don't deal with the end of the world. We don't deal with the alien invasion force a lot. But we have the characters who are fighting for their lives, and like that to me is I connect with that a lot. Like I really gravitate towards those stories. Like I love the big Avengers and cosmic stuff. I love those books, but like there's something about the guy where you're like, I just don't know how he makes it off this subway car tonight. Like I don't know how he makes it out of this alley. I love those stories. I've always loved them. Like Frank Miller's Daredevil to me when I was a kid was like, it blew my mind. Like, and so yeah, I think, when I started on the Punisher, my editor Jake, who's one of the best editors in comics, he said, it's your job to take this as far as you can, and it's my job to tell you when to stop. And he was like, just always full speed. And so that's what we tried to do on the book, and I think people really responded well to it. And like, there's a lot of second guessing in a lot of books where you're like, is this too much? Did we go too far? Is this okay? And in the Punisher, like, I think most Punisher fans don't want you to second guess. They're just like, break it, man. Like,
Bring it on.
yeah, like someone's got to be in the ground by the end of this. Like, who's it going to be? So that's that was sort of our motto, is like, how close can we get this to blowing the whole thing up, and then stop it from blowing up?
So you mentioned X-Men, and I am a massive X-Men fan. And I think this past year, between what you were doing on Uncanny and what Jonathan Hickman is doing now with Hawks and Pox, is actually one of my favorite periods in X-Men history since I've been reading comics. Sure. And so I was a big fan of your run, and I wanted to ask, what was the call for you? What were you sort of tasked with? Because that run took the X-Men in places we've never seen before, and I thought that was absolutely amazing. So how much freedom did you have, and what did you want to do?
I had a lot of freedom on that, but Jonathan was hired before we were hired, so like we knew what he was doing. We knew where we ended and he began, which is a little unusual in this. Usually, you plant your flag and then it's someone else who picks it up and runs with it. We were like told, like, this is where he is, get them there. So I think I heard Jonathan's plan. Obviously, the man is a genius. He's one of the best writers in comics history. And when he walked me through Hawks and Pox, I was like, "That's you're a genius. Like, that's brilliant." And then I was like, "What do you want me doing?" And he was like, "Do what you want to do. Like, get there. Get it to here, but do what you want to do." And I talked to Marvel a bunch. Jordan White, editor, and C.B. Cebulski, editor in chief, and I said, what are my ground rules? And they said, Jonathan is bringing them to a new era. Close this era down. Take them into the darkness. Jonathan's going to bring them out. And I was like, okay. And I'm a child of reading Chris Claremont comics, like those, the Mutant Massacre and the Outback and all those books are like, I read those as a kid, and you sweat when you read them. You're like, I don't know if they make it out of here. Like, I don't know if they'll survive. And they didn't all survive. And to me, that was always a defining thing for the X-Men. That it's not every X-Men book, but a lot of them, the Avengers are saving the world. The X-Men are fighting to live. Like, they're fighting to have a place in the world and to survive. And I wanted to do that book where we show the fight to survive and, like, and end this era. Like, Marvel did a little thing where they were like, there are these eras of X-Men, and it's, Stan and Jack, and then it's Giant Size, and I think it was Age of Apocalypse, or Jim Lee, and Age of Apocalypse, and Grant. And, I might view it a little differently, but, like, it made sense to me, and they were like, you're the end of the Grant Morrison era. What Grant started, you're finishing. And that was heavy. And and I went back, and I've read all the books, but I went back and I was like, oh, Grant opened his run by killing 8 million mutants. I'm gonna close mine by killing 16 that everybody loved. Like it starts out at a macro and it turns into a micro, and it's heartbreak and it's tragedy, and they did all these things, and now that era's gone, and we're getting Jonathan's vision, and it's really exciting to be, you know, part of what came before, and it's now I get to watch it as a fan, and it's awesome. Yeah.
So, I know that there was a lot of people that were upset about some of the things that you did, and my reaction to that, and hopefully you can speak to this as well, was these are characters that we all love, and so obviously when they die or when bad things happen to them, it feels bad as a fan. But when I read House of X #6 and how that sort of ends, and without any spoilers, it was a hopeful place.
Yeah.
I immediately thought of what you did, and I thought, wow, you took them to one of the worst places they've ever been, and this moment matters so much more at the end of House because of that. And so I guess all I'm really saying there is that it worked, at least for me, especially in retrospect with what we just saw.
Yeah, it's funny because, obviously the way we consume comics is very unique to a lot of things. And it's always funny when people are very mad at you because you kill a character and you're like, they're on the cover for an upcoming book. Like, I like in some ways you're like, well, you're supposed to be upset.
Right.
Like, it's supposed to be upsetting because you should be in the moment and you should feel it. But also, like, yeah, for some perspective, like, we didn't actually kill your friend. Your friend is coming back. But, I think that it's funny now because a lot of people who sort of were very upset were like, oh, I see the plan now. I see. And I say it wasn't my plan, it's Jonathan's plan, but I knew what it was, and I knew we could get people back, and I knew we could have these losses, and it would make the brighter part brighter. And so I've had a lot of people be like, reading House of X and Powers of 10, I went back and reread yours, and they're like, and I really like have a new appreciation for how it works, and I love that. I love the idea, because that's the fun of comics, is that it's a tapestry, and every thread connects back. Like I'm acknowledging, all the way back to Stan and Jack and Chris Claremont and Peter David and, Mike Carey and Kieran and Fraction and Brubaker, and just like, thousands of issues of X-Men comics, I'm tying back to them, and Jonathan is doing the same, and it all will flow backwards. And so watching people take that trip backwards already is really fun. And to see that it's all a bigger picture. Like you read the comic, but you're studying a tree, but you're standing in the forest. And I really love that.
So my favorite character in all of media is Jean Grey.
Sure.
And you were the man tasked with bringing her back.
Yes.
I've been looking forward to that ever since I started reading comics, because for the longest time, she was dead.
Yeah.
And then you come along.
Yeah.
And so in a very interesting way, not only were you tasked with sort of setting up where the future of the X-Men would go for Jonathan, kind of leaving them in this interesting space, but then you also brought back a character that a lot of people hold sacred, like I do. How did you feel about that responsibility? Did you even feel like it was a responsibility? And what were your goals there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the heaviest things at that point in my career. That was like the heaviest responsibility I've ever had. Like I'm the same way. Like I grew up, it's not an exaggeration. Like I learned to read on Dark Phoenix, like reading those issues and like seeing her come back. And obviously she's back and gone again. But like, yeah, I mean, like Jean is one of my favorite characters in all of comics, and it was very heavy. And I think, I remember the time coming in. Marvel asked me to do it, and I think they thought I was going to pitch Galactic War, the Shi'ar are coming, the Kree are coming, whatever. Like the Phoenix Force must be stopped, an AVX type thing. And I just said, no, my goal is to make Jean a character again, not the Phoenix, not the Bird.
Right.
And like the Bird is great. I love the Bird, but the Bird's been around and the Bird will be around. But Jean has been gone. And when she wasn't gone, she's overshadowed by this thing. And I said, I want to do a personal story. I want to do a Twilight Zone. I want to do the sort of Twin Peaks take on Jean's return. And like, I remember being in the room and there were a bunch of editors there, and a bunch of them looked like I was looking around and was like, I just lost this job. Like, I just lost it. And I remember just like the right people just being like, yes. And I was like, oh, thank God. And you know, and then I went to my first Marvel Creative Retreat and had to sit down in a room with Jason Aaron and Brian Bendis and Mark Waid and like all my heroes, and they're like, walk through it. And I was like, oh, I got to do this again. Jesus Christ. And I did it, and like, you know, Brian Bendis took me aside and he was like, that's the hardest kind of story to pitch in the room, like the small personal one. And he was like, you did it. And that to me is like, you know, one of the proudest moments for me is that. And you know, I'll say my goal at the end was to tell a story where Jean is back, and it's not about the Phoenix, it's about her, and it's a breakup story. She's been in an abusive relationship with this flaming space bird for years, and now I want her emancipated. I want to see her be Jean. And I finished it, and they were like, do you want to do a Jean book? And I was like, no, like, you don't want that from me. Like, it would be sad, and it's her trying to fix herself emotionally and find herself. And I couldn't figure out how to not do that. And they were like, okay. And I said, I want to do New Mutants, and they were very supportive and let me do that. And they said, Tom Taylor's going to do it in X-Men Red. And they're like, you know, you can talk to him if you want. And I know Tom, and Tom's amazing. And I was like, no, just let him go. Like, he can read Phoenix Resurrection and see what he thinks. And Tom's take came in, and they sent it to me, and I read it, and I was like, it's beautiful, it's amazing. Like, it's not where I would have gone, and I'm so happy that that it wasn't me tasked after that. Like, I'm proud of my part, and I'm in love with what Tom did after to make Jean who she is now. It was really great and empowering and beautiful, and I like, you know, I got choked up about like, he's made her this hero that she should be again. Like, I brought her back, and now he's put her where she should be, and it's just, you know, it's a real honor.
Man, I'm so happy to hear you say what you just did, because the personal, small story is exactly what I was hoping for. And I think that with Jean, so often she's misunderstood, and it's not about all of that. Like you said, it really is just about this character who has been through hell.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that she's happy.
Yeah.
You know.
For sure. Yeah.
And so thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's really kind of you to say. I appreciate it.
So that's all the time we have. I wish I could talk to you forever, but thank you so much for giving me your time.
Oh, thank you.
And where can the people find you?
Online. I'm mostly at my house. If you want to come by, I live in Harlem. I have a Twitter. I kind of don't really use it very much, but I have it. It's Ashcan Press, ASHCANPRESS, and that's like my website that I don't update, and my Facebook page that I haven't logged into. So you can find me there. No, I'm just writing all the time, so I'm kind of not on. But I'm on Twitter, and if you have something to say, like, I'll see it and try and respond. You can tell me that you liked a book or hated a book. I'm always excited to hear anything. Like, anybody, if you spent $4 and bought the comic, like, tell me what you thought. I want to know. Like, I appreciate everyone who does that, so for sure.
Awesome. And as for me, I'm Sean from the Comics Pals. We are all over the internet at the Comics Pals. If you want to get us on social media, please do. Talk to me about Jean Grey. Love to talk about her. You guys know how to internet by now. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe on this video, and stay tuned because we've got so much more coming from New York Comic Con. We are not done yet. It is only Saturday, and yes, we're tired, but we're motivated, and that counts, right? Sean from the Comics Pals. Take care, guys.